How much do I need to save in order to buy a house? We have folks ask us this all the time. I'm sure they ask you as well. And we've got down payments and we've got closing costs. So down payments are going to vary depending on the loan type. We've got some programs like VA that are 0% down. We've got some awesome conventional programs where we can do 1% down. And then we've got programs where we can do 3% down conventional, where that's pretty much across the board. If you're a first-time home buyer, you can put 3% down. FHA is minimum of 3.5%. So really anywhere between 0 and 5% is what we're looking at for primary residence holders, is between 0 and 5% for down payment. Let's say it's 0. Okay, if it's 0% down, does that mean you need no money to close? The answer is no. 0 down doesn't mean 0 cash. So in addition to down payment, we've got closing costs. Now, closing costs are going to vary, but generally speaking in Florida, because we have to pay for homeowners insurance up front, we've got transfer taxes, we've got to pay for an appraisal, title fees, all of that. If buyer pays title, generally speaking, we're looking at about 3% of the purchase price for closing costs. So if it's a $300,000 loan, or excuse me, $300,000 purchase price, you're looking at about $9,000 in closing costs. Now, do they have to pay for that out of pocket? The answer is no. So there's a beautiful thing called seller concessions where we can ask the seller to pay for our closing costs. And I'm sure Josh has probably learned you up on this because he's an expert at it. But basically, you can ask the seller to pay for the closing costs, and that's very common right now, especially in a buyer's market. It can even be worth it where if that seller is asking $300K, we can offer $310 and ask for $10,000 in seller credits. So they're still netting their $300,000, but we get to get that credit and decrease the cash to close for a client. So you are going to need a certain amount of money for closing costs, but even if you ask the seller to pay for all of your closing costs, you're still going to have some money saved. And this is where we run into this with VA buyers. Maybe they're new, active duty, they don't have a lot of cash, and they say, how much money do I need bare minimum to get in? Number one, we're going to have money for an earnest money deposit. So that can, generally be about as low as $1,000. So we're going to need minimum $1,000. Going to have to pay for an appraisal. Sometimes we can pay for that at closing, but generally that's going to be about $650 out of pocket. And lastly, a home inspection. Those range somewhere between $500 and $800. So at the end of the day, you're going to want to have at least about $2,000 saved up for this home transaction, even if you get those full concessions. So hopefully that answers your client's questions of how much money they need to have and how much money we can ask for in seller concessions. Bonus tip, if you ask for 4% or if you ask for more in seller concessions, we can use those extra dollars to buy the interest rate down. So having more seller concessions is always more beneficial, because if you got a little extra in seller concessions, that will help lower their payment more than just having a little less on the purchase price. So seller concessions are huge. That is how much you need, and that is Closing Costs 101.